Good morning, Ratman. I'm your host, Jay, and I'm just hanging out. And unfortunately, my co-host Corgi is not joining me because she went over the top. Also, so Corgi isn't joining us because her computer that she ordered is currently bouncing between two capital cities of states that she doesn't live in. It was supposed to come about 3 days ago, which is why we were late, because I was just waiting for her computer to show up. And then it didn't, and now it's scheduled to arrive next week, and we'll see if that happens. Hopefully it does. Hopefully the next few episodes won't just be me again. Today's episode, as always, is brought to you by rats. They're very popular in the trenches. So today we are going to be getting into the factions and some of the notable units and general lore stuff of the Trench Crusade tabletop game. This is a kind of joke light video. I kind of got real into it. This, as the name implies, is a lot. This will most likely be part 1 of 3 videos, and by far the most amount of research for a video I have ever done. And that's just part 1 alone. I had to consult the Bible for some of this. Also, if part 2 comes out and then the following week part 3 doesn't come out, I ran out of time and part 3 will be in January. So in interest of time, because this video is already going to be really long, let's get started. Though it might be a bit shorter because Corgi's not here. So I will have less things to get me off track. So before we start, I need to establish a thing because it will come up. There is a thing called the Metachrist. There are references to multiple Metachrists, at least 7. By patching several lore tidbits together, we get an image that these are clones of Christ. And the church has just abandoned the concept of transubstantiation, started to practice actual ritual cannibalism of Christ. This cannibalistic act grants actual powers, as we will get on later. But here's a quote for now. The Metachrist did cut its flesh, and gave it to the disciples. Its ruined mouth could not form the words, but it grunted noises that the Mentalist monks translated as, "Take, eat, this is my body." And the Metachrist did leak blood from its eyes and mouth, which the Mentalist monks caught in a chalice, once again translating the Metachrist's painful noise, "Drink ye, all of it." So that's fun. So, to start, we'll briefly touch on equipment and technology before moving on to some breakdowns of factions. The equipment right. Saint Eligius, Saint of Horses, has helped the Holy See, which is the Catholic Church, to infuse steel with divine light, creating a much stronger and malleable steel. They use that to create giant suits of armor. The general durability of the armor has just meant that it kept up with the advances in technology and is just bulletproof, mostly. The Hell Crew, on the other hand, have hell metal from Tartarus. It sucks. Not in the sense that it's bad, it's really good, but it burns your body and soul using it, and you will never heal from the wounds. Fun! Because of this, a decent chunk of combat is still hella medieval. Just dudes hacking at each other with swords and hammers. They also have anti-tank polearms, which were a real thing. Japan used them in World War II. You do not survive using one. It's just an anti-tank explosive strapped to the end of a stick. The constant melee, though, doesn't mean guns don't exist. Pretty much most soldiers use a bolt-action rifle, though other more complex weapons are used. One of the listed examples is a sniper rifle. So like a bolt-action rifle. Okay. Machine guns are also in use. Interestingly, one of the pictures is of a Thompson machine gun, a gun invented in the 20s and also American, which doesn't exist in this world. There is trade between Spain and the South Americas, but colonization didn't happen at all. That is confirmed by the devs. Grenades, anti-material rifles, and assorted other things, such as not weapons, but martyrdom pills, that makes the taker more resistant to pain and exhaustion that causes a negative effect on the body. Whereas the Hell Crew have Flammenwerfers that werf flammen from hell, fire swords, and alive bullets that turn people that get shot into zombies. So as far as artillery goes, the Chrysos in New Antioch have artillery pieces that are over 300 feet long, or 91 meters. Meanwhile, the Hell Crew, not to be outdone, use artillery pieces that are 666 feet long and have a 1,666 millimeters in caliber. That one is called the Mouth of Hell. Creative. They also both deck all their equipment in holy and unholy symbols respectively, alongside holy and cursed trinkets. And the power of these have swayed many battles. I mentioned in the previous episode that the game uses the inverted cross as a symbol for the Hell Crew, despite it being a symbol for St. Peter the Apostle. You reckon both sides just march into war with the inverted cross and it just cancels each other out? Neither of them are fighting with holy or unholy powers anymore? So here are two units that exist in lore but don't have any corresponding models or rules for a specific faction. They're mercenary rules, so it's a bit different. So they won't come up with the rest of the episode, so I will cover them now. First, we got Observers. These guys are weird. So they are monks who live in absolute solitude. They, quote, sharpen their minds and bodies to make themselves living weapons in the hand of God. So these guys, once they become a monk, never leave their temple, except when they are specifically requested. What makes them fun is they wear their goofy helmets, which allows them to hear the voice of God, allowing them to see the past, present, and future to a degree. Like me, I too, to a degree, can see the past, present, and future. It allows them to be superhuman martial artists. You know, seeing your opponent's moves would do that. But hearing the voice of God isn't an easy thing, because the voice of God never decays. What that means is they hear every word God has ever spoken all at once and have to focus to try and get the words he is speaking to help them at this moment in time, and not hear God say something like perhaps, "Yo, Gabriel, you reckon I could make Abraham stab his son?" No, I reckon I could do it. Be back in a moment. There is, however, a divine echo, which makes sleep impossible. So instead, they take sedatives and mind-altering drugs, because that's what you want on your team. An elite martial artist monk that hears the future from God on ayahuasca. They can also just recite the words of God, and the metal in their helmets allows them to replicate it very well, granting them the ability to just mind control people, or demons. They do, however, if they slip in concentration for a moment, become just a regular dude who's really good at stabbing with a polearm and also very stabbable. So next, we got Paladins. The Paladins solve a problem, that being, the forces of hell can attack Earth, but the forces of Earth can't attack hell. So the church created the Paladin program, where they got close to perfect communicants. More on them later, but those are people who consume the flesh and blood of the Metachrist. It has its drawbacks, and these are the guys who come out mostly fine. They are, because, you know, blood of Jesus, able to walk through the gates of hell unscathed and actually fight in hell. They are allegedly near perfect in mind and body, and the one in the picture is 5.1 meters tall or 17 feet tall. So they hang out in Castle Sant'Angelo, real place in Rome, until the Council of Saints sends them out to do stuff. So I'm just going to read this quote. In such time the paladins emerge from their seclusion. They go to their arming chambers and kneel at the center upon the mosaic of the militant Christ, the Lion. They are then armed and armored by blinded and gelded serfs, for no impure gaze or carnal desire is to fall upon the paladin by the servants of the church, and briefed on their mission by one of the cardinal generals. They really just went, hey, you're going to serve the holiest of people who carry the blood of the Savior, and in return, all we ask for is your balls, both sack and eye. They are also given last rites, because, yeah, they're about to go into hell, or as the book calls it, Gehenna, which, yeah, I guess, not really what that word means, but sure. So there is originally 12 paladins, though 2 have been killed, and 1 has turned traitor. I feel like that's a reference to something. I'm not sure what, though. Could be anything. But if you were to mention to the church that one of them Judased it, they will kill you. Still can't place that reference. This will keep me up at night, trying to figure that one out. For 300 years, the church has been trying unsuccessfully to create just one new paladin. They also can't replace their equipment, because the equipment is made of tektite from Golgotha, that being the place in Jerusalem that Jesus was crucified. So they are slowly racking up injuries, burns, and scars from their adventures, and quote, Each paladin is forced to endure searing pain like no earthly suffering, where their armor has weakened, relying on their unshakable faith during their lonely crusades into perdition. Each circle of hell requires a specific armor to resist that circle. It says some are burning hot and others are absolute zero, alongside other things. If we are talking Inferno, the book, only the 9th circle, that being treachery, is frozen. But because the whole armor thing, they operate alone. They don't have enough armor for 2 people to go into the same circle. And because of the whole, there is only 9, can't make more armor deal, they are very rarely ever sent out. And they only operate under the orders of the Council of Saints on missions they know are going to be massively beneficial, and the long-term viability of the mission is seen by the synod of strategic prophecy. Those are the observers, the guys who see the future through the voice of God. And if all that is greenlit, then they get sent out to play a little Doom in hell. So, we are going to start off with the factions. For today's episode, we're only going to be covering the 2 Christian factions. Next week, we'll be covering the Muslim faction. And then the week after, we'll be covering the Hell Crew, or the next episode, rather. So, to start, we got the Principality of New Antioch. Hey, Trench Crusade guys, if you're watching this, you aren't. But if you are, your lore primer of the New Antioch is missing 2 paragraphs and stops mid-sentence. If you're wondering how I know that, the full entry is on Facebook, and I told you in the previous episode, the Facebook pages were work-related. So, as we stated in the previous episode, Antioch got blown up in 1545. They don't know how, it just did. And despite a demonic crater being left where it once stood, there were survivors that actually kept fighting. So 14 years later, the Sword Council of Vienna agreed to rebuild it, and that a portion of their tithes will go towards it, though rarely coin. Mostly supplies and shit. Occasionally, people. Not in a slave way, just in a, hey Dave, you're really good at building castles. Yeah? You're going to Antioch. Fuck! There's also a general support for New Antioch because, hey, I would rather not have a war at my doorstep. If we could keep the war in the Near East, that would be neat. I don't know how that really works, because they did in fact go around it, but it also says it's the shield of Europa and Africa. Kinda the wrong part of Asia to be protecting Africa. Kinda needs to be in Sinai for that. Up until the present day, New Antioch has withheld at least 8 great sieges, and its walls have never once breached. It also has 77 towers. I mentioned that because God is 7. We'll talk about them a bit later, but Trench Crusade has its own form of dreadnoughts in an equally horrific state, and they have embedded hundreds of them into the walls. I think they might be more helpful if they were in fact not embedded into the walls, but hey, maybe it's just poorly written, and by embedded they mean, how you embed a military unit into one another, and they just kinda on the walls and not part of the walls. It's also a vastly multicultural city, as Christians the world over flock there to help its defenses. We'll get to some of them in a bit. It's mentioned, though, that the last remnants of the Varangian Guard were there. Doubt they lasted long. They also just kill anyone who shows slight deviation from church doctrine. Fun. Of course, it's not a grim dark world without a little bit of oppression of the working class. The city is filled with factories churning out weapons of war, and thousands die every year in the factories. But hey, plus side, they get some dope statues to say, hey, sorry we killed you, but you were a very useful resource. But if you were wondering like I was, this is a sole Christian city in a sea of hell. How are they still alive? This doesn't make any sense. Don't worry, it's explained. For you see, the princes of hell and the archdevils, should be archdemons, are what we call a gaggle of fucking idiots. They scaven it. They can't put aside their differences for 5 seconds to take a direct opposition. So, despite the fact that they have the power to quite easily wipe it off the face of the map, again, they can't, because no one commands a large enough singular army to do it, and no one wants to team up, and when they do manage to get enough power, it never lasts for long enough. But one problem is that the demons are immortal, and time is different for them. So Antioch might go a lifetime without an attack, but to the demons, it's just a blip for them, and it's the equivalent of a few days. Point is, they aren't constantly fighting for survival. They have very long stretches of peace. So Antioch is in fact run by one guy, kinda, the Duke of New Antioch. He commands the armies of New Antioch, and everyone swears fealty to him. But armies do come in from other kingdoms that only truly answer to their leaders. But that's not to suggest he's weak or a puppet. His army that exclusively serves him is the largest of all the Christian armies. Recently, the Duke has been taking a bit of an offensive role and sending warbands out into no man's land for a litany of reasons. But in doing so, comes into a lot of conflict with heretical forces alongside other warbands fighting for the same resources, and also crazy people. This is one of those things you read and you go, oh, this is only there to explain why two players playing Antioch could, in law, fight each other. So, Antioch has some sub-factions. These are sub-factions you can play for your warband. I don't bring them up for that reason, but because it's some interesting information about the world state. So, to start, we got Ayr, an independent island with its language still alive. And they say Trench Crusade is grimdark and not a utopia. So, going with the actual language, the Airnach, that being the people who live in Ayr. So, Ayr, much like in real life, is a stronghold of Catholicism. And while they are seemingly safe from the English, they aren't, however, safe from the Hell Crew, who have been constantly raiding them, causing famine. We just can't get away from it. And they also have faced the Black Grail, that being the zombie plague, alongside an actual invasion that was attempting to destroy the House of Manuscripts. Not a real place, I checked. It's where they keep some of the holiest texts. You ever read something and you're like, I feel like I should be offended by this? I'm not, but I feel like I should be. So, because Ayr got invaded a bunch, they got really good at guerrilla warfare. You know, like the IRA. There was more than one IRA though, but it's still, you got an independent Ayr and they still become the IRA. So, historically, real world speaking, Ayr had bands of usually noble men and occasionally women who were now adults but had yet to inherit their land, so they just instead opted to become a public menace and raided cattle, fought other clans, and fought as mercenaries. These bands were called Fianna. That pronunciation might be wrong. I bring this up because they back. They are nomadic warrior bands that live off the land. I, for one, wouldn't try to live off the land in literal hell. That's how you accidentally drink demon blood. They are generally unpopular, however, highly sought after, because they cause problems wherever they are. And they follow the Celtic pagan tradition of carrying the skulls of those they kill. So the church kinda hates them, and the general perception is they are, quote, godless hellraisers, but they are really good at what they do. That being causing problems wherever they are. Ayr, absent of most resources from all of the wars, instead pays its yearly tithe in warriors instead of money or resources. But as mentioned, they are so highly sought after, this alternative payment is greatly appreciated. Final note about Ayr is that some warrior lines carry a rare latent berserker trait, which I don't think is how genetics works, but I'll allow it. And through drinking the blood of the Metachrist, it will activate them, which makes them more resistant to damage, allegedly. So, when Antioch needs to take out a particularly difficult target, they send in the Stoßtruppen of the Free State of Prussia. Shout out to the Free State of Prussia managing to exist for at least 4 years prior to its existence in real life. I'm going to read this next bit verbatim. The Free State Shock Troopers are selected and trained specifically to perform lightning assaults, master the firearms of close assault, and operate in fire teams that are perfectly synchronized in their combined arms tactics. Admittance to this group is strictly by merit. All members must be decorated athletes under 25 years of age, unmarried, and must have demonstrated a high level of aggression on the battlefield. So they die a lot. 20-minuters, they call them. That's a Blackadder reference for all 3 people who get that. I love referencing shows that aired before I was born. Alba I'm going to read this verbatim again. Hailing from the Scottish Highlands, where the church is strong, these men, and a few fierce women, come from New Antioch in search of glory, forgiveness of their sins, as well as dreams of acquiring valuable loot to send back to their island homes, but above all, get their hands on some devil worshippers. Why was that written with exclamation marks? Nothing else was written with exclamation marks. Was the rules writer just really excited to talk about Alba? So Alba is the name for Scotland in Gaelic, if you didn't figure that one out. So much like the rest of the British Isles, kind of struggling with the constant naval raids. Specifically, noted for them that the submarines were kidnapping their young, so probably kids, for sacrifices. Because they needed to add an in-law reason for the Almanac to hate the English, the British fleet, put a pin in that, and the moving fortress Britannia is to be only used to defend themselves, which creates a hatred for the English. The English could help the Almanac, but they choose not to. So that pin right, it calls them British. Now, Britain is a place. You have the British Isles, that being Great Britain, Ireland, Man, Northern Isles, and the Hebrides. Then you've got Britain, that being England, Scotland, Wales, and Cornwall. So if England is just England, why are they calling themselves Britain? So my guess, because Cornwall got eaten by the English before the game diverged from history, Cornwall is part of England. But in the real world, Cornwall is part of England. It's not independent. So that leaves Wales. But Wales wasn't stolen by the English until 1282. But if they were committing resources to fighting the perpetual Holy War, why do that if there were more important things? Especially 15 years later, they invaded Scotland, which seemingly didn't happen. The point is, I don't know why England calls itself Britain, or the state of Wales. Quite possibly, they own some of France, because the deviation wouldn't be far off from when they owned Normandy. So France may never have taken it back. Quite possibly, that's why it's Britain. It's England and a chunk of France. Also, if someone wants to correct the exact timeline information with England's ownership of France, that'd be great, because Duke William the Bastard de Normandy took England in 1066 and then owned England and Normandy, but then Henry I took Normandy 30-ish years later, but I don't know, and it's not what this video is about, so I'm not going to commit too much time in finding out the exact timeline of England and Normandy. Moving on, Abyssinia. That's modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea. An important kingdom historically. Abyssinia, or the Ethiopian Empire, not to be confused with the other Ethiopians, the ones that appear in the Iliad, because they are from Nubia, which is north a bit. So there was so much about Abyssinia. So Egypt has been eaten by the Hell Crew, and specifically Mammon. He's in the Bible, but it's just money. The line, you cannot serve both God and Mammon, means you can't serve God and pursue wealth and greed at the same time. But that concept was a little complicated for the Catholic Church, so Mammon became a demon that personifies greed, and if you get a little too greedy, he'll get you. So Mammon, the demon, not the concept of money, really wants to take Africa. Oh boy! I wonder if that's a metaphor for something. Now, nothing comes to mind, but he's having a lot of trouble because Africa is defended by Abyssinia, also known as Ethiopia. In Africa, Numidia, historical borders pictured here, and Nubia, also known as Ethiopia, historically speaking, which is around the Nile in the Sudan region. So Ethiopia, and Numidia are working to stop Mammon from invading Abyssinia in particular, as his goal is something I'm going to read. Quote, "The plan of the Prince of Greed is twofold. To overcome the Holy Church of Libella, desecrating and auctioning off the legendary relics within the churches and cathedrals of Axum, and to claim the fabled gold mines of the Queen of Sheba for himself, which he covets beyond any other treasure trove on earth." You ever just lose the past 10 minutes of your life and you're just like, have I actually been reading the script, or have I just been going into the mic? I feel like that's a very specific problem that very few people have had. Moving on. So, first thing, Queen of Sheba. She's from the Bible. Gives a bunch of gifts to King Solomon. No one knows where Sheba is. It ranges from Ethiopia to Yemen. So, in theory, they are in Ethiopia in this world. Second point, plans twofold, right? Overcome the churches of Libella, which is in Axum, and sell all the relics. Except Axum and Libella are two different locations, almost 400 kilometers apart by car. Now you, much like me, might have caught this discrepancy. No one caught this discrepancy but me. However, upon some research, Libella might have been built during the Axum Kingdom era of Ethiopia. So possibly they are referencing that, and this is not the case. They listed a threefold plan as twofold. So much like real life, Abyssinia is ruled by the Solomonic dynasty, a word I had so much difficulty spelling. And also dynasty. I misspelled dynasty like 6 times. That is, the Solomonic dynasty is an imperial dynasty that is still around, albeit without any power. Last one having power being probably the most famous of the dynasty, that being Haile Selassie, the second coming of Christ in the Rastafarian religion. Rastafarianism is a very weird religion, but they claim to be descendants of both the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon, famous for that time he suggested to saw a baby in half. They are the representatives of Africa, the whole continent, in the Sword Congress of Vienna, a thing that gets referenced repeatedly, and I don't know if it is ever established what it actually is. My guess is, in real life, the Holy Roman Empire held a Congress of Vienna to discuss succession stuff and other stuff. So I reckon it's like that, but seemingly recurring, and it's to organize a combined defense of Christendom against the Hell Crew. So there is the tithe, right, that has been established. Seemingly, the tithe is every 7 years. God is 7 tracks. And the Solomonic dynasty takes pride in the fact that they deliver their tithe on time. So I'm just going to read this verbatim, because I read this and it was just a, hey, wait, what? Quote, "So once in every 7 years, the Negerid war drums sound the catet, the call to arms. The volunteers gather at Axum, the spiritual capital of the nation, where the Ark of the Covenant is said to be kept under the watchful eye of warrior monks, who are born to their roles and never leave their post." So Abyssinia just allegedly owns the Ark of the Covenant. What? That seems like a massive detail to just tack on at the end of a sentence. So, Abyssinian soldiers really want to be a part of the war in New Antioch and actually compete for places because it's an adventure, which, yeah, sure, I guess. And the unrivaled status given to those who go to serve the Duke, alongside the fact you get to be Doomslayer and kill demons in literal hell. Imagine you're just in the trenches and an African guy wearing a lion mane walks past you and then jumps over the top, and all of a sudden you start hearing the Doom soundtrack start booming from heaven. It'd be a real, why am I even here moment. Also, their best soldiers are trained since children to fight lions in hand-to-hand combat, and if they kill an adult male lion, they get to wear its mane. Fucking crazy people. So, before they go to war in Antioch, they go on a pilgrimage in full military gear to Abuna Yamata Ga. Real place. I should have checked its pronunciation, but it's too late now, which is 2.6 kilometers up, which is really high. That's larger than Mount Kosciuszko, Australia's largest mountain, and very hard to spell. So, here's a quote. "Miraculously, there have been exceedingly few deaths caused by the soldiers losing their footing and plummeting to their deaths. Each one of those who have fallen have been found to be a heretic infiltrator, and their broken and rotting corpses are left unburied as a warning to those traitors who would defile the sanctity of the shrine." I don't believe you. I think Abyssinia made that up. So, after their pilgrimage, where totally only heretics die during, they get loaded up with all manner of riches and then shipped off to New Antioch. So, here's the thing. Egypt, controlled by the Hell Crew, as is the Red Sea and the Erythraean Sea, a sea that doesn't exist in modern terminology and consists of the Gulf of Aden, the Arabian Sea, and the Persian Gulf. Both of those ways are a real roundabout way to get to Antioch. So, instead, they are forced to use the Mediterranean Sea. However, as mentioned, they control Egypt. So, it says they march to hidden ports of the coast that are still free of the enemy. which is presumably in Egypt, but like marching an army through the entirety of Egypt is hardly stealthy. And if they've been doing that for hundreds of years, I don't know, man, seems kind of sketch. So they get into a lot of naval battles in the Mediterranean, and they lose a lot of their gold and shit. But, quote, when the songs and drums of the warriors of the Solomonic throne can be heard in the harbour and echoing on the famed walls of New Antioch, the citizens know that aid has come once more. This is also when they give all their riches as gifts to the Duke. Less than 1 in 10 Abyssinian soldiers will return from Antioch. Quote, in the eyes of these survivors, one can catch a glimpse of the horrors that have scarred them for life. Which, yeah, in the picture, that very much seems the case. So lastly, you have an army called the Papal States Intervention Force. They operate in Antioch, however, they take orders from the Pope and their leadership is handpicked by the Pope. They sometimes send the Swiss Guard. They're a thing. There's a good song about the Swiss Guard, The Last Stand by Sabaton. So, some Antioch units that stood out to me before we move on. We got sniper priests. They blind themselves. Then they use their faith in God to strike down enemies of the church, and if they happen to shoot an ally in the back, it's fine. He was secretly evil the whole time. Next, we got the mechanized heavy infantry. You'd think being a mechanized infantry, they'd be in vehicles. But no, it's a mech suit. Big motherfuckers walking around with what looks like a drum-fed Vickers machine gun. Also, I have a gripe with them. They are called mechanized, with a Z, which is the American way, but armor is spelt with a U, which is the British way. Why? Also, on that note, if you're wondering why I'm saying spelt and not spelled, spelt is a word. Also, I looked up Vickers to see what they're doing. You never hear about them? Wild trajectory. Became a different company, which became different companies, which became different companies, and so on. This has no relevance to anything, but that's kind of what we do here. Get some end of video content. So, moving on, the next faction we got, the Trench Pilgrims. The Trench Pilgrims are, quite simply, crazy people. If I lived in this world, I would just simply not go to the Holy Land to fight. So if that didn't explain, Trench Pilgrims are literally just normal people who, for one reason or another, decide, fuck it, we go into war. Whether it's because they see visions of the apocalypse, they are maimed in some form, criminals seeking redemption, or just genuinely crazy people. That's not a Che insert. That's what it says. Quote, they come, the mad and the maimed, the God-touched and the guilt-ridden. And they are loosely organized by prophets, those who see holy visions of Armageddon. They also, being a barely sanctioned fighting force, kind of just fight with whatever they can find, such as muskets, a scourge, also known as a whip, and Molotov cocktails, a thing named after a guy who in the setting is 24 and currently not bombing Finland. Here's a quote, Pilgrims are not officially sanctioned by the Holy See of New Antioch, but the church still blesses the Crusades of the Faithful. So, Holy See of New Antioch. We got like a anti-pope thing going on, the two popes. Every other time the Holy See is mentioned, it's just the Holy See. And it mentions their stuff being in Rome. But now it's talking about the papacy as if it were in New Antioch. Huh? We should bring back anti-popes. They were fun. Because of the whole pseudo-sanctioning, they are a very common sight. Usually going on attacks of which they never return. Because they are just crazy people. Because they are, again, just crazy people. They have little to no combat training. So they wear iron capriots to protect them against the horrors of war. Blessed by the church to aid in protection with an inbuilt gas mask for gas attacks. It allows them to just, mentally, tank a demon. Fear me, I am horrors beyond mortal comprehension. To witness me is to witness sheer evil. A darkness so foul it drives mortal men's minds mad. Neat. However, I raise you, pointy hat. Can you not see how pointy my hat is? And sometimes, when these crazy people die, they just get back up. They get Lazarused by the seventh Metachrist. The resurrected, quote, feel no pain from bullets or bayonet thrusts. I mention that specifically because I like the idea that they get shot perfectly fine. They get stabbed perfectly fine. But if they stub their toe, still hurts like a motherfucker. So factions within the Trench Pilgrims. We're going to start with the ones that have barely any mention, and I'm just going to read the straight quote to save myself the mental effort of having to make this fun. There are a bewildering number and variety of Trench Pilgrim processions. The path of pious revenge swears in the name of Saint Olga and uses flamethrowers, burning grenades, and incendiary ammunition to assail the heretics. The Pilgrims of the Iron Path follow Saint Rita of Cassia and go to battle with hammers, mauls, maces, and cudgels, and hammer nails into their heads in memory of the saint they venerate. The Theban Legion of Rome carries the heads of the heretics upon their standards in the memory of their patron Saint Maurice. They fight with swords and other blades, competing with each other for the number of heretics' heads they amass. So now, we got the Procession of Sacred Affliction. These guys are fucked. They prefer close quarters combat, and their armor is decked out in images of the saints. You ever notice how saints are kind of the way Christianity can keep its polytheistic tradition alive? Anyway, images of the saints make them bulletproof. Neat. They also take a quote from the Bible a little too literally. This is from the King James Bible, the gayest of the Bibles. If you're wondering what I mean by that, King James, famous bisexual, paid the Catholic Church to fuck off and leave him alone about all the dudes he was openly banging, which led to the creation of the King James Bible. Allegedly. The creation of the King James Bible and James's relatively open bisexuality might be unrelated. This is the Bible quote. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for them that a millstone were hanged around his neck and that he would drown in the depths of the sea. So these guys carry millstones on their back and then tie them around the necks of sinners and drown them in puddles of mud and blood. Not what that means, but okay. They also don't wear the magic capriots, instead just opting to raw dog hell because faith is their shield. Next, we got the Cavalcade of the 10th Plague. These homies hate the Metachrists. They only read the original scripture and ignore the updated scripture with the new doctrines of the Metachrist. They also just steal communicants, we'll get to them, and then force them to fight for them, to repent for the sin of their creation, which is awfully convenient. Using communicants and shaking my head the whole time so people on the bus know I disagree with it. Also, big into the slaughter of lambs. Do it before battle, then cover themselves in that blood. Then draw holy pitchers in that blood, because the blood protects them. Then they march into battle, singing hymns. Fuck, I hate singing hymns. Had to do it in school. They tried to do the upbeat fun ones, still sucked. Get better music. I hear Jesus sat by the road and he cried, "Show me the way" in my nightmares. Terrible song. Stop singing that. It's bad. Get better hymns. Lastly, we got a relatively new one. The War Pilgrimage of Saint Methodist. I say relatively new. It was released like 7 days ago. They Orthodox and from Moravia, which is in Czechia, which is also known as the Czech Republic, because they changed their name to Czechia. And then the Czechians were just like, no, who gives a shit? And they continue to call themselves Czech Republic. But officially, Czechia. They're technically probably from Greater Moravia, which is a lot more than Czechia, but they are from Velorad, which is in Czechia. Also, again, Orthodox, a religion a lot of people don't seem to know exists. 230 million people. You ever see a cross like this? Orthodox. So, the Hell Crew sent some death commandos into the monastery on Velorad. One dude walked out. A guy by the name of Brother Akikios of the Orthodox Order of St. Methodist. Did you know there are 3 St. Methodists? I'm guessing it's the last one, who died 40 years after the second one, and also in Velorad. He's also the patron saint of Europe. You ever wonder if the saints just get appointed to sainthood of things, and they're just pissed about it? Like, hey, Eligius, you're going to be the saint of horses. A Methodist, you're going to be the saint of Europe. Oh, you mean like Southern Europe? No, Europe. Oh, that's like a lot of work. Yeah, that's why your brother is also becoming saint of Europe. Right. Can he just be the saint and, make me a saint of, I don't know, Finland? No. Meanwhile, Judah's over in the background going, hey, at least your job is achievable. They put me in charge of the people who literally cannot be helped. Anyway, now, this monastery, the one that was destroyed, was responsible for the creation of anchorites. More on them in a bit. And with the destruction of the monastery, it was thought lost. But, lo, Akicios knew the secret on making them, so he fucked off to the theocracy of Hellas. That's an interesting note. Greece is a theocracy now, or at least part of it, and he created a monastery in Mount Athos, real place, famous for its Orthodox monasteries. So, a bunch of monks that were already there decided to join Akicios, naming him the first war prophet of the order. Got 2 quotes. Many lay members joined and became supporters. Eventually, the foot soldiers of the well-equipped and disciplined war pilgrimages of Saint Methodus. No other pilgrim progression can match the methodical and technical approach of the foot soldiers of the order. And, next quote, in their fortified monastery, the learned monks hoard the knowledge and the audacity of modifying the sacred designs of Saint Methodus. So, they got a bit of an AdMech thing going on, their general well-oiled machine, and they aren't supposed to modify the tech without the blessing of the saints. They can, but it seems like a bit of a social transgression. So, another quote, we're a bit quote heavy today. Their shrine anchorites are without a peer and feature many modern weapons and adjustments which allow them to carry modern long-range weaponry. No other warband has such an abundant access to anchorites or the variety of sophisticated weaponry and equipment. So, these guys are your old school Orthodox, and generally not a fan of the new additions to the faith. They hate communicants, again more on them in a bit. They view it as dangerous heresy, and I'm going to be honest, think they might be right on that one. And generally hate the martyrdom devices. A bit more on them in a bit, but they are bombs to take out the enemy and yourself at once. Now, that is a mortal sin in Christianity, and the Order of Methodists saw that and went, what the fuck are we doing here, guys? Also, quote, as well as holding to other beliefs, many of the Trench Pilgrims view as essential part of their crusade against the forces of Inferno. Now, I don't know if I'm just dumb or that's poorly written, possibly both. I don't know what that means. I think it's supposed to mean they have opinions that the other Trench Pilgrims think is a big no, but it doesn't read like that. So, we're doing another quote. Bitter schisms and arguments with other sects sometimes erupt into violence, and the church itself accuses the order of heterodoxy of clinging to the outdated Eastern Orthodox faith. Now, a few things. I think that it's supposed to be Eastern Orthodox, and they just typoed it. They definitely typoed heterodoxy. It was spelled phonetically. But I think that Orthodoxy has kind of syncretized with Catholicism, meaning they functionally share the same practices. Catholicism, quite famously, has done it with a lot of pagan religions. That's why Easter and Christmas are Christian holidays. They weren't originally. So it's not out of left field that they mended the schism. There is also a reference to the New Orthodox Syncretic Bible, which again implies Orthodoxy and Catholicism are kind of the same at this point. They keep mentioning the church. Now, the church, in my experience, usually means Catholic Church, but it can also just mean Christians as a whole. But the way it's being used in this kind of implies the Catholic Church, or possibly the unified church if one exists. Now, the princes of the church. I'm really going to need a comprehensive explanation of the Christian faith in this world at some point. They, in general, just let the Order of St. Methodius do their thing, because they are both really good at their job in battle and live in a mountain fortress. It's not really worth trying to bring them in line. That is, as long as they keep doing what they are doing, which is try to take back Trebizond, a city in Turkey, though presumably the Turks never happened in Trench Crusade. Trebizond, now known as Trabzon, located in the Anatolia part of Turkey, which is most of Turkey, which, if I recall correctly, is where the emperor is from in 40k, allegedly. They tried to take this because, according to Prophet Akicios, who had a prophetic visions, unsullied faith is still practiced there, and the salvation of mankind will be achieved. Also, they throw the term prophet around a lot. Jesus is supposed to be the last prophet. That's some big heresy. For the guys who are all like, what the fuck are we doing here? The fact they are calling their guy a prophet is extremely hypocritical. Anyway, they keep attacking the place, and they have never reached the walls, which only makes them try harder. I, for one, would try a boat, which brings us to our fan favorite segment, which isn't as fun when Corgi's not here, because you can't hear our screams of protest. For those joining us for the first time, it's a segment we do every week and have always done. It's Whose Boat Is That Boat? I'll give you a little moment at home to try and figure it out. That's enough time. I'll tell you whose boat it isn't. The fucking war pilgrimage of St. Methodius. The ship is in fact belonging to the Greek Navy in 1914. I kind of struggled to find out whose boat is that boat for this episode. But we do it every week, and we always have done. So it has to be here. So now for the units that stood out, which is almost all of them. We'll get started with simply the Stigmatic Nuns, who fight with the outstanding usage of armor by utilizing the strategy of helmet on, tits out. Now, these women, as the name implies, bear the stigmata. Corgi, who is listening from home, and those of you at home who don't know what the stigmata is, that is the wounds in which Christ suffered. Specifically, it doesn't have to be physical wounds, but just pains and marks. But that's boring and cool. I could just be like, oh, I've got the stigmata, guys. My feet hurt and my hands hurt. Cool. Yeah. Real provable that one is. So the wounds are on the hands/wrists and feet alongside a wound on the side where Longinus stabbed him. Though sometimes wounds appear on the forehead. Well, crown of thorns. Also, apparently, over 80% of recorded stigmatas are women, which is an interesting fact. So ignore everything I just said though, because these nuns bear the stigmata of the third Metachrist. And if they take any injury that makes them bleed, they in fact get stronger, and not like a psychosomatic strength, an actual supernatural strength. And because of this, they actively want to be hurt in battle, which is probably why they got their tits out. We also got castigators. I bring them up because they are the only characters in the rules that are allowed to attack their own team. Their main role is to literally whip their own side into religious fervor, or punish the sinful or cowards. Next, we got prisoners. These guys are prisoners, usually sinners. They have a bomb strapped to their backs. They run into the enemy lines, which is then detonated. This is the aforementioned martyrdom devices. In their death, they hope to cleanse their souls. But again, committing a mortal sin. I don't think it works like that, bro. However, sometimes they just survive. The bomb, strapped to themselves, exploding. They survive that. Here's their rules. If the explosive goes off and the prisoner somehow survives the battle, you can buy them a new explosive for 35 ducats, as normal, or simply deal them without. Hey, so you survived that bomb? Yeah, I know, right? Oh, God must have some great plans for me. Yeah, we're strapping another bomb to you. Don't come back this time. Huh? So next, the communicants. Told you we'll get back to them. These guys, they are like paladins. They consume the flesh and blood of a Metachrist because fuck transubstantiation. Except where the paladins are the near perfect guys that come out of that, these guys are the freak rejects. They are strong as fuck giants and can just heal any wound. Neat, they also allegedly see clearer blind, so they nail crosses through their eyes. Okay, fucking weirdos. So now, Corgi and the rest of you who are listening at home, I got a question for you. That's right, it's an encore of our fan favorite segment, Whose Boat Is That Boat? Hey, guys, whose boat is that boat? I'll give you some time. This particular boat is called a Shrine Anchorite. Now, some of you might have gotten that. You might have gone, well, that's clearly a Shrine Anchorite. You're wrong. That's not whose boat it is, though. You've identified the make of the boat. But the boat belongs to the Monkinside. It's the Monkinside's boat. So, unless you got that right, you're wrong. The Shrine Anchorites are what we mentioned before. They are just metal walking tanks, 3.6 meters to 4.5 meters tall, or 12 to 15 feet. They are powered by a diesel engine, worth noting that these were made hundreds of years ago. In the real world, the first diesel engine was invented in 1893, and they also have trumpets that blast prayers at everyone and everything. They are also coated head to toe in holy relics and symbols and prayers for their respective religious sects. But the real fun thing is, on the inside, spikes, hooks, and a dude. The pilot is a monk who is having a ball, constantly being stabbed. Because, hey, Jesus also went through a lot of pain. I'm just like Jesus. Once interred, they never leave. They are in there for good. They will inevitably be killed in battle. But very, very rarely, they might make it to old age. Once they die, their body is removed and parts are put into reliquaries and then strapped onto the anchorite. Now, the fun thing about the anchorites is that they are damn near indestructible, which is good, because there are only a few hundred of them. They were made in Velorad, quote, a long time ago. And when it was destroyed, the process was lost to the general public, and the guys who are making the new ones are not giving them out. So the fact they are nigh indestructible really helps them not lose them. But generally, people are fine with the slow loss, as the mech suits of New Antioch are just generally considered better versions. It's smaller and destructible, but more maneuverable and easier to make, being that it doesn't require one small group of people to build them. But the Pilgrims love them. Not that they have a choice. They have not the resources to get the mech suits, but they are really good weapons of war, and, as a plus, a portable shrine. So the anchorite weapons, unless it's one of the new ones, in which case it's guns, but their standard weapons are a giant fuck-off mace and an adamantine Catherine wheel, an execution method named after Saint Catherine, because they tried to break her upon the wheel and then it melted when it touched her, so they just cut her head off instead. And the crazy nuns and just general trench pilgrims will volunteer, like crazy people, to be broken upon the wheel, quote, as a sign of their willingness to suffer for their sins and for the spiritual protection their sacrifice is said to grant the anchorite. Church hates this, by the way, but it doesn't stop them. They will get swarmed before a battle, surrounded by people wishing to be broken upon the wheel. Also, as a note, I've kind of known about breaking upon the wheel for ages, but I just thought breaking on the wheel was like they tie a rope to them and then tie them to a wheel and then crank the wheel and it just like breaks their bones by like stretching them all out. That's not what they do. And look, horrible way to die. But there was a humor in me learning that it is in fact not what they do. And instead, they just simply hit them with a wheel repeatedly. Like, they have the person on the ground and then they take the wheel and they just start slamming the wheel down on their legs and arms. Also, if the wheel breaks, saved by God, and they just let you go. Also, they tie you to the wheel at the end of it by threading your broken limbs through the spokes, and if the wall falls off where it's placed, or if you fall out of the wheel, saved by God, and they just let you go. So that about does it for today's episode. I am so tired. As I said, this was by far the most research I've done for one episode. We got 2 more to go, hopefully without a break, but to be honest, I think it will have a month gap. Again, I will be sending this to Corgi early so that she's able to do the drawings and then it'll be uploaded with the drawings. Obviously, you've noticed that, but if you didn't see the previous episode where she was absent and you're wondering, oh shit, where did the drawings come from? That's Corgi's job on this podcast. She's just absent a computer at the moment, so she can't be present for the recordings. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how long this turned out to be, which it would have been a lot longer if Corgi was present. If Corgi was present, this video would have probably gone past the 2-hour mark. But yeah, sorry that this is not that funny comparatively. I just got like super into the lore and I really enjoy the setting. I really enjoy Trench Crusade. I'm excited to see how it goes. I have the sneaking suspicion that it's just gonna be a thing that lingers around for a very long time, but it's never really gonna take off. Its excitement's gonna die down and it'll just be something that just continues and probably doesn't get too much lore tidbits, but hopefully it does get a bunch and I will continue to cover them as they come up because I really like the setting. As I say in the previous episode, I really like the Abrahamic faiths, just like learning about them. It's fun. It's a fun setting. I really enjoy it. Yeah. So we will be back next week, possibly with Corgi, possibly not. Remains to be seen. Her computer was supposed to be delivered on the 2nd. I'm recording this on the 4th, by the way. That's why we're late, was because I delayed it so that Corgi's computer would be here. And then her computer on the 3rd got delayed till the estimated arrival date being the 10th or 11th. So we'll see if she's in the next episode, because it's getting real close to when I leave, and I might not have the time to edit together 2 episodes, or at the very least 1 episode. But yeah, we'll be back next week, hopefully on time, covering the Sultanate, and then the next episode after that will be the Hell Crew, hopefully, most likely in January. Anyway, thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye. So here's just one of the paths Vickers went down. So it started as Vickers Limited, right? Then it merged with another company to become Vickers Armstrong. Then Vickers Armstrong was split into 4 companies. And the one that we are following is the British Aircraft Corporation, which was then merged with 2 other companies, becoming British Aerospace, which was then merged with another company, becoming BAE Systems, and the 7th largest defense contractor in the world. It's mentioned, though, the last remnants of the Varangian Guard were there. It's mentioned, though, the last remnants of the Varangian Guard are there. It's mentioned, though, that the last remnants of the Varangian Guard were there. Doubt they lasted long. The ship